The story begins on a sleek, towering space station located in the heart of the neutral zone, where multiple species from across the galaxy have gathered for an unprecedented peace conference. Among them is Princess Liara, the youngest and brightest member of the Zintari royal family. The Zintari, an ancient and highly advanced race, have long since perfected peace, having evolved past the need for violence or conflict. Their technology is unmatched, their minds calm and rational, untouched by the chaos that once plagued the universe. Liara, despite her royal status, is different from most of her kind. While her people have grown distant from the raw emotions that once fueled their existence, Liara still feels them, especially curiosity, wonder, and a sense of longing. She finds herself drawn to the human delegation, particularly one man, Captain Jacob Harris. Jacob is a soldier, a man forged in the heat of battle. His life has been one of struggle, of surviving wars and conflicts that never seem to end. He has seen things that no one should have to, and yet, his eyes still burn with an intensity that surprises those who meet him. At first, their interaction is nothing more than a formal exchange of pleasantries, typical of diplomats trying to maintain peace. Yet, beneath the surface, there's an undeniable tension. Laura, with her quiet confidence and controlled elegance, finds herself unexpectedly intrigued by Jacob. There's a rawness to him, an energy that seems to come from deep within. She's never encountered someone like him. His words are laced with sincerity, his gaze direct and unwavering. Unlike the Zintari, who have long perfected the art of emotionless conversation, Jacob speaks with passion and conviction. His movements, his laughter, and even the way he listens are all so human. In his presence, she feels something she's not accustomed to, a stirring of emotions she can't quite place. For Jacob, the encounter is equally intriguing. He's been briefed on the Zintari before, studied their technology and culture, but nothing prepared him for the enigmatic presence of Princess Liara. He's used to the cold precision of military leaders, the logical minds of politicians. But Liara isn't like them. There's something more to her, something hidden behind those royal robes and regal demeanor. Her intelligence is apparent, but it's her empathy that draws him in. The way she listens, the way she seems to understand things that others might miss. He can't help but feel a strange pull toward her, a magnetic attraction he can't explain. The connection between them isn't just physical, it's something deeper, more profound. And yet, they both know this cannot be. She's a princess, a member of a race that has evolved beyond the need for emotions like love. He, on the other hand, is just a soldier, bound by his duty to humanity. There can be no room for anything more, especially not in a place like this, where the fate of entire civilizations hangs in the balance. As the conference progresses, Liara finds herself seeking out Jacob's company more and more, despite the danger it poses to her reputation. Every conversation feels like a revelation. She learns about human culture, their history, their resilience. In return, she shares stories of the Zintari, of their quest for peace and enlightenment. But every time they speak, she feels the weight of her duty pressing down on her. She knows that her people will never accept a relationship with a human. Her duty to her race is clear, and the consequences of even a hint of affection for someone like Jacob could be catastrophic. And yet, every time they part, there's a lingering feeling that she can't shake, a sense of wanting more, of wishing for something different. Jacob, too, struggles with his growing feelings. He has seen war, has fought to protect his people, but he has never been this drawn to someone. He can't help but admire Liara, not just for her beauty, but for her intellect, her compassion, and her strength. But he knows he must keep his distance. His loyalty to his mission, to his people, comes first. In a galaxy so full of danger, where tensions between races are high, a relationship between a human and a Zintari could bring down more than just their worlds. It could unravel everything the peace conference has worked for. And yet, despite his reservations, he can't help but wonder, is it worth the risk? Their encounters become more frequent, their conversations more personal. There's an unspoken understanding between them, a shared knowledge that their bond is dangerous but impossible to ignore. It's a slow burn, a quiet tension that builds with every word, every glance. Both know that something is changing, something neither of them expected. And yet, as the peace conference drags on, and the possibility of war looms ever closer, neither is prepared for the choice that lies ahead. The universe is on the brink of chaos, and the spark between Liara and Jacob might just be the thing that sets it all in motion. As the chapter ends, Liara gazes out at the stars from the conference station's observation deck, her thoughts consumed by the human soldier she can't seem to forget. Across the galaxy, Jacob stands in the shadows of the station, his thoughts equally tangled. They are bound by duty, by their roles in this galactic chess game. But the pull between them is undeniable, and both must confront the truth. No matter how far they run, their destinies are intertwined. The universe will never be the same again. Over the following weeks, Liara and Jacob found themselves frequently thrown together, whether by duty or circumstance. They were both assigned to various diplomatic events and joint military missions, making it nearly impossible to avoid each other. At first, their encounters remained professional, a continuation of their earlier conversations, brief exchanges filled with formality. But as time passed, something deeper began to form between them, something neither had expected. It started with small moments, when their eyes met across a crowded room, or when their hands accidentally brushed while exchanging a document. These small, seemingly insignificant interactions were enough to set their hearts racing. Liara, who had always been taught to control her emotions, began to feel a flutter of something she couldn't explain. She had been trained to think logically, to see the world through the lens of reason. Her people, the Zintari, were a race that had long since suppressed the chaos of raw emotion. They viewed such feelings as primitive, something to be controlled and managed. But in Jacob, she saw something completely different. He was raw and unfiltered, his emotions open and free. He didn't hide behind the calm demeanor she had come to associate with strength. Instead, his strength lay in his vulnerability, in his honesty. She found herself fascinated by this human ability to feel so deeply and so openly. He could be angry, joyful, fearful, or hopeful, all without apology. It was something she had never truly known, and it made her want to understand him more, to understand humanity in a way she never thought possible. Jacob, on the other hand, found himself just as captivated. At first, he had been wary of the alien princess. He had heard stories about the Zintari, their intellect, their peace, their cold rationality. He had always thought of them as distant, untouchable beings, too perfect in their ways to ever relate to someone like him. But Liara was different. There was something about her that didn't fit with the image of her people. Beneath her composed exterior, he could see the sparks of curiosity, of empathy, and even of doubt. She wasn't the untouchable princess he had expected. She was a person, someone who wrestled with her own inner turmoil, just as he did. It was in their quiet moments together, away from the eyes of the others, that Jacob began to see her for who she truly was. They would sit in silence during long flights, or in between meetings, and share stories of their pasts. Liara would speak of the Zintari's ancient history, of their rise to power, and their commitment to peace. Jacob, in turn, would tell her about Earth, about the struggles his people had faced and the battles they had fought. Over time, these stories turned into something more, something personal. They began sharing their dreams and fears, their hopes for the future, and the weight of their duties. Jacob told Liara of his experiences as a soldier, of the wars he had fought and the comrades he had lost. Liara, with surprising vulnerability, confessed her own doubts about her place in the Zintari royal family. She had always been taught that her duty was to her people, to preserve their peace and ensure their survival. But with every conversation, with every stolen glance, she felt herself drifting further from her people's ideals. Their bond grew deeper, stronger, and with it came an undeniable attraction that neither could ignore. What began as a forbidden friendship slowly morphed into something more dangerous, a secret romance. They stole moments when they could, meeting in quiet corners of the space station or finding time away from the constant diplomatic pressure. They didn't speak of their feelings aloud. There was no need. The way their hands would linger just a little too long, the way their eyes would meet in understanding was enough. It was a secret they both kept hidden from the world, a fragile thing that could shatter in an instant if anyone discovered it. But despite the danger, neither could bring themselves to pull away. Jacob found comfort in Liara's presence, something he hadn't realized he was missing. In her, he found a kindred spirit, someone who would understand the loneliness of duty, of sacrifice. Liara, in turn, found herself drawn to him in ways she never thought possible. But as the weeks passed, the weight of their obligations pressed down on them both. Jacob's loyalty to humanity, his duty as a soldier, was something that could never be abandoned. He was sworn to protect his people, no matter the cost. Liara, as a member of the Zintari royal family, was bound by her duty to her race. The consequences of betraying her people were unthinkable, and so they both struggled, torn between the desires of their hearts and the responsibilities they could never escape. Liara knew that a relationship with a human, especially one as public as theirs was becoming, would scandalize her people. It would lead to her disgrace, if not worse. Jacob, equally torn, wondered how they could ever be together in a galaxy that seemed so determined to keep them apart. As they continued their clandestine meetings, both felt the pull of something greater than duty, greater than the expectations of their races. But neither of them could escape the truth. They were living in two worlds that would never truly accept them, and the love that was growing between them could destroy everything they had worked so hard to protect. In the quiet moments they shared, they both knew they were dancing on the edge of something dangerous. But neither could walk away, not when the connection between them was so deep, so undeniable. They were bound by something more than just attraction. They were bound by the very thing their worlds had tried to suppress, their hearts. And as the weeks passed, the stakes of their secret romance grew higher. Would they choose duty, or would they choose each other? As the weeks wore on, the fragile peace between the Zintari and the Vorik, a fiercely aggressive alien faction, began to crumble. Tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface for years suddenly erupted into open conflict. Liara could feel it in the air, the growing unease among her people, the whispers of war that had been ignored for so long now coming to the forefront. Her father, the king of the Zintari, made the announcement that would change everything. The Zintari military was preparing to launch a full-scale offensive against the Vorik. The move was necessary, he argued, to ensure the safety of the Zintari people and to maintain the fragile peace that had lasted for centuries. But to Liara, the decision felt like a betrayal of everything she had come to believe in. The Zintari had always been advocates for peace, finding a way to solve conflicts without bloodshed. Now they were preparing for war. As the preparations for battle began, Liara found herself torn in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her duty as a princess, as the heir to the throne, demanded her full support for her people's actions. She had been raised to believe in the righteousness of her race's quest for peace, in the necessity of protecting their civilization from those who would threaten it. Yet, every time she thought of the impending war, she couldn't ignore the growing pain in her chest. Her people were about to wage a war of destruction, and she feared that in the process, they would lose the very thing that made them different from the Vorik, their compassion, their understanding, and most painfully, her love for Jacob. Jacob, too, was facing his own conflict. The human military had been called upon to join the Zintari in their mission, and he, as one of the top commanders, was selected to lead the joint human-Zintari force in a critical strike against the Vorik. It was an honor, yes, but it came with a heavy burden. The decision to join forces with the Zintari, once seen as a potential ally, now felt like a betrayal of everything he had fought for. He had seen enough bloodshed, enough destruction, to know what war did to people. But the mission was clear, and he had a duty to his people. As he prepared to lead his troops into battle, a sense of dread settled in the pit of his stomach. He couldn't shake the thought that everything he was about to do might destroy not only his life, but also the life he had begun to build with Liara. The night before Jacob was set to leave for the front lines, the two of them found themselves alone in a quiet corner of the space station, a rare moment of peace amidst the chaos. Liara had been avoiding him for days, caught between her love for him and her sense of duty to her people. But tonight, the weight of everything that had been left unsaid seemed to press down on both of them, and for the first time, the walls they had built around their emotions seemed to crumble. Liara stepped closer, her eyes searching Jacob's face, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Liara stepped closer, her eyes searching Jacob's face, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was palpable, thick in the air, and despite the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring, they both knew they couldn't walk away from each other. Not now. Without a word, Jacob reached for her, his hand trembling slightly as he cupped her cheek. Liara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. For a brief moment, the universe seemed to stand still, the noise of the conflict and the war preparations fading into the background. All that mattered was the feeling of her breath against his skin, the way her heart seemed to beat in sync with his. Then, as if drawn by an invisible force, they kissed. It was a kiss that held every unspoken word, every emotion that had been building between them. It was desperate, full of fear and longing, a final attempt to hold on to something real before the world changed forever. The kiss was everything, the promise of love, of loss, of an uncertain future. When they finally broke apart, the silence between them was deafening. Jacob's voice was strained as he spoke, the weight of his next words heavy in the air. "I don't know if I'll come back from this," he said quietly, his hand still resting on her shoulder. Liara's heart ached at the thought, but she knew it was the truth. He was about to face the heart of the conflict, leading a mission that could very well end his life. She reached up, gently pressing her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "You will come back," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. But deep down, they both knew there was more at stake than just their love. Jacob's mission could either tip the balance of the war in favor of the Zintari, or end in a disaster that would devastate both their peoples. And as much as Liara wanted to fight against the war, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was inevitable. With one final, lingering kiss, they said goodbye, knowing that no matter what happened, the connection they had forged could never be undone. It was the only thing they could hold on to, in a universe that seemed bent on tearing them apart. As Jacob left for the front lines, Liara stood alone, watching him disappear into the distance, her heart heavy with the fear that she might never see him again. The war had escalated far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Every day brought more destruction, more lives lost, and more tension between the Zintari and the Vorik. Liara, once hopeful that there could still be a way to avoid all-out conflict, now found herself immersed in the brutal reality of war. Her role as a leader had become more complicated than she ever imagined. She was tasked with supporting the Zintari military strategies, advising her father, the king, on matters of diplomacy and defense. But despite her royal status, Liara was finding it harder and harder to reconcile the ideals of peace she had been raised with and the horrors unfolding before her. Then, during a particularly tense meeting with her father and the Zintari military command, Liara learned a horrifying truth that shook her to her core. In their relentless quest to end the war with the Vorik once and for all, the Zintari had developed a weapon, one so devastating, so powerful, that it could wipe out entire populations in an instant. It was a last resort, something designed not just to defeat the Vorik, but to send a message to the entire galaxy that no one would dare challenge the Zintari ever again. The weapon was unlike anything she had ever imagined. It was an annihilation device, one that would erase entire cities, entire worlds, with no regard for the lives of innocent civilians. Liara's heart sank as the truth of the plan settled in. Her people, once paragons of peace, had created a weapon that made them no different than the tyrants they had fought to overthrow in the past. The very foundation of everything she had believed in was crumbling before her eyes. But it got worse. As Liara's thoughts raced, trying to process the enormity of what she had just learned, her father's voice cut through the haze of her disbelief. The weapon had already been activated. Worse still, the Zintari planned to use it on a human colony, one that Jacob had visited during his last mission. A wave of nausea swept over Liara as the realization hit her. The very people she had come to love, humanity, were about to be targeted, annihilated by the very race she had sworn to protect. The horror of it all left her feeling numb, unable to comprehend how it had all come to this. How had her people, her family, allowed such a monstrous plan to unfold? How could she, a member of the royal family, stand by and let it happen? Liara's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Loyalty to her people, her duty as a princess, screamed at her to stay silent, to allow the plan to proceed as her father had intended. She had always been taught to think of the greater good, to put the needs of the Zintari above all else. But her heart, torn apart by the love she felt for Jacob and the knowledge of what was about to happen, rebelled against this cold, logical thinking. In that moment, Liara realized she could not, would not, stand idly by while an atrocity was committed. She had to act. She had to stop it, no matter the cost. Her decision was instantaneous, but the consequences were far-reaching. If she warned Jacob, she would be betraying everything her people stood for. She would be branded a traitor, an enemy of the state, and possibly worse. But the thought of millions of innocent lives being erased, of Jacob being caught in the devastation, was enough to push her to action. She couldn't let it happen. With trembling hands, Liara left the meeting in haste, slipping away before anyone could stop her. She had to find a way to reach Jacob, to warn him before it was too late. Time was running out, and every moment she wasted could bring them closer to the weapon's detonation. She knew that her choice to defy her father, to go against everything she had ever known, would have consequences. But she also knew that the alternative was unthinkable. She would not be complicit in the destruction of the very people she had come to care for. The weight of her decision pressed down on her like a storm cloud, but there was no turning back now. As Liara worked quickly to contact Jacob, her mind raced through the possibilities. Would he believe her? Would he have time to evacuate the colony before it was too late? Every passing second felt like an eternity. The lives of thousands, perhaps millions, were now in her hands. And with that realization, the consequences of her betrayal became clearer than ever. If Jacob didn't act fast enough, the Zintari would wipe out the colony, and with it her love. The thought was unbearable. At that moment, Liara knew there was no turning back. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, made a choice that would mark her for the rest of her life. But in her heart, she knew it was the only choice she could make. She loved Jacob, and no matter the consequences, she would not allow her people's mistakes to be his downfall. She had made her decision. She would stop the Zintari, or die trying. Liara's decision was no longer a matter of hesitation. It had become an urgent, life-altering necessity. She couldn't remain in the palace, bound by the chains of duty and family loyalty. Every second she spent, there was another second closer to the destruction of the human colony and the devastation of everything she held dear. So, with a heart heavy with both fear and resolve, Liara defected from her royal position. She slipped away from the watchful eyes of her people, using all the knowledge she had gained growing up in the palace to sabotage the Zintari military systems. The complex web of high-tech security, communications, and weaponry, once tools of immense power, now became her greatest asset in the fight against her own family's decisions. Liara worked in the shadows, carefully and methodically disabling critical systems that would have enabled the weapon's activation. It was risky, far riskier than she had ever imagined, but the stakes had never been higher. If she didn't act fast, everything she cared about would be lost forever. Her heart pounded as she finished her work. There was no time to waste. Liara quickly sent a message to Jacob, her hands trembling as she composed the words. "The weapon's activation is imminent. I've sabotaged their systems, but we need to move quickly. I'm coming for you." The message was brief, but she knew he would understand. The human soldier who had captured her heart was her only hope now. Within moments, the response came, clear, determined, and full of urgency. Jacob was already preparing to leave the front lines, ready to fight alongside her in a battle she could no longer avoid. Together, they had to escape. The Zintari, loyal to the royal family and their cause, would not allow a defection so dangerous to go unpunished. As soon as Liara made her escape, word spread quickly throughout the palace, and Zintari loyalists were dispatched with orders to capture her at all costs. The clock was ticking, and the chase had begun. Liara and Jacob's escape from the palace and their subsequent flight across hostile space was a race against time, a race they knew they might not win. But with their combined knowledge of military tactics and the desperate bond that had formed between them, they were ready to do whatever it took to stop the attack on the human colony. The journey was filled with constant tension, each moment bringing new dangers. They navigated treacherous regions of space, avoiding patrols and bounty hunters sent to capture them. Their only hope lay in their ability to outthink and outmaneuver the Zintari forces who pursued them relentlessly. With every jump through hyperspace, every twist and turn through asteroid fields and barren planets, they grew closer, not just physically, but emotionally as well. They had always shared a connection, but now, as they fled for their lives, they opened up in ways they never had before. Lara spoke of the weight of her upbringing, the pressure of being a princess in a family that demanded absolute loyalty, and the crushing realization that her people weren't as virtuous as she had once believed. Jacob shared the burdens of his own past, his service as a soldier, the people he had lost, and the hard choices he had made for the greater good. In these quiet moments, amidst the chaos, they grew to understand each other in ways neither had imagined. It wasn't just the war they fought against now. It was their pasts, their families, and everything they once stood for. Yet, even as their bond deepened, Liara knew the cost of her actions. She had betrayed her people, her family, her entire way of life. She had once believed in the righteousness of the Zintari cause, in their commitment to peace. But now she could see the truth. The weapon was not the only thing they had created. It was a symbol of everything wrong with her people. The Zintari, in their quest to protect their legacy, had become something they had once despised. And she, the princess who had been raised to uphold that legacy, was now its most dangerous traitor. As they traveled, they came face to face with harsh choices. The human colony was still vulnerable, and the Zintari's forces were growing stronger by the hour. Liara and Jacob would have to forge new alliances with those they once considered enemies. They would need to trust the very factions that had once fought against them if they hoped to stop the impending disaster. Every move they made had the potential to change the course of the war, and each decision seemed to carry the weight of an entire galaxy on their shoulders. With bounty hunters on their tail and Zintari loyalists closing in, they were running out of time. The stakes were higher than ever. Liara had lost her place in her world, her royal status, and now her people's trust. She had defied everything she had once stood for to protect Jacob and the future they might still have together. But as the war raged on, the question lingered: could they stop the attack on the human colony in time, or had they already sealed their fates? With every passing moment, the answer seemed more uncertain, and the possibility of betrayal from every direction felt closer. But one thing was certain: there was no going back now. Liara and Jacob were no longer just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of two worlds. And in the heart of this chaos, their love would either be their greatest strength or their undoing. Liara and Jacob arrived at the human colony just in time. The Zintari weapon, a monstrous force capable of annihilating everything in its path, was mere moments away from activation. The colony, a peaceful outpost on the edge of human space, had no idea that it was about to be wiped out. In the cold darkness of space, the Zintari fleet loomed like a predator circling its prey. Lara's heart raced as she and Jacob entered the orbit of the planet, knowing they were about to face the most difficult decision of their lives. This wasn't just about stopping a weapon anymore, it was about saving a future, and that future might come at a price neither of them was prepared to pay. The Zintari fleet was waiting, their ships surrounding the colony in a perfect ring. The weapon's core, the heart of the Zintari's terrifying plan, was embedded in a massive ship in the center of the formation. Liara could see it through the window of their ship, bright, cold, and ominous. It was the culmination of everything she had feared and fought against. She had sabotaged the Zintari systems, but now she was here, face to face with the consequence of her betrayal. The Zintari fleet would not stand down, not without a fight. Lara's pulse thundered in her ears, her mind struggling to catch up with the magnitude of what she was about to do. She had once been a princess, a representative of peace and rationality. Now, she was the one who had to decide whether to destroy her people's last hope for victory or let her betrayal be the reason the galaxy would burn. "Do you think they'll stop us?" Jacob's voice broke through her thoughts, steady but laced with uncertainty. He sat next to her, his hand resting on the controls of their ship, his eyes fixed on the massive Zintari ships in orbit. The weight of the moment pressed down on them both. They had come so far, had survived so much to reach this point, yet everything seemed poised to collapse. Jacob, ever the soldier, had to weigh his duty to his people against the woman he loved. "I don't know," Liara said, her voice barely a whisper. "But we have to try. I won't let them do this. Not to you, not to anyone." Jacob didn't answer right away. Instead, he nodded, his jaw clenched tight as if he, too, were grappling with the reality of their situation. They had fought for this moment, but the cost of their choices had always loomed large. For Liara, the stakes had become even more personal. This wasn't just about saving humanity anymore. It was about redemption, about trying to undo the damage she had caused by betraying everything she had known. Her own people, the Zintari, now stood in her way. As they neared the weapons ship, the Zintari fleet did not hesitate. The ships moved into position, ready to block them from getting any closer. Liara could feel the weight of their presence, the threat of what would happen if they didn't back down. There was no time to waste. Liara reached for the comms, and her voice echoed through the silence, strong and clear. "This is Princess Liara of the Zintari royal family. Stand down immediately. I'm giving you one last chance." The response was instantaneous. "You have betrayed your people, Princess. There is no turning back now." Liara swallowed hard. She knew what they meant. She had betrayed everything. Her duty, her family, her entire race. But the man sitting beside her, the man who had made her see that there was more to life than duty and tradition, was worth fighting for. The colony was worth fighting for. This was her chance to stop the weapon from being used, to stop the destruction of her people's legacy. But it came with a heavy price. Jacob's voice was tight with emotion when he turned to her. "You don't have to do this. We can still escape. We can still—" "No," Liara interrupted him, shaking her head. "If we leave, the weapon will destroy the colony. If we don't act now, I will have failed both of our people." She turned to face him, her eyes filled with determination and regret. "I have already betrayed my people, Jacob, but I'm not going to let this happen, not anymore." Jacob's heart ached for her. He knew the weight of her decision, the cost of the betrayal that would follow. "Then let's make it count," he said, his voice firm, despite the fear gnawing at his chest. He trusted her, with all his heart. And yet, as they prepared to confront the Zintari fleet, he knew the choice they made today would change everything. Together, they made their final approach, the decision weighing heavily on both of them. Liara transmitted the command to disable the weapon's core, her fingers trembling as she entered the sequence. The Zintari fleet's ships flared with energy, and a bright, blinding light flashed from the weapon's ship. It was happening. The weapon was disarming, but it wasn't without consequence. Liara knew that this was the point of no return. As the weapon powered down, she turned to Jacob one last time, her voice a whisper. "I hope we can live with what we've done." Jacob looked at her, his heart full of love and regret. "We will, together." But as the Zintari fleet began to close in on them, and the human leaders prepared to make their own decisions, Liara realized that the true cost of her actions was just beginning. She had stopped the weapon. She had saved the colony. But at what price? Would there ever be a future for her and Jacob after all of this? The answer was uncertain, and the choice she had made would reverberate across the galaxy, changing everything. The final battle unfolded in the shadow of the weapon's looming threat, and Liara knew that the choice she had made could never be undone. The weight of her past hung over her as she stood at the heart of the conflict, her once glorious position within the Zintari royal family now a distant memory. As the Zintari fleet closed in, Liara's mind raced. She had betrayed everything she had ever known, but in doing so, she had created a chance for something better. Something worth fighting for. With Jacob by her side, she had managed to disable the weapon, but the price of that action was steep. Her betrayal, her defection, these things could not be forgiven by her people. She knew that once this was over, she would have no place left among the Zintari. The royal family would consider her a traitor, and the Zintari people would never accept her back. But as she glanced at Jacob, the man who had become her anchor in this storm of uncertainty, she felt a strange peace. For the first time, she truly understood the cost of loyalty and the value of love. And in that love, she found strength. As the last of the Zintari ships fell away from the disabled weapon, their fleet retreating into the distance, Liara and Jacob made their final move. They had no choice but to flee. The human leaders, grateful for the saving of their colony, but furious at Liara's betrayal, offered them no refuge. The Zintari's wrath would be relentless, and they knew the price of their defection. But neither Liara nor Jacob could stop now. They were fugitives, outlaws in the eyes of both their people. The galaxy had become a dangerous place for them, yet they no longer cared. Their bond, forged through pain and sacrifice, was all that mattered. Together, they escaped into the unknown, traveling through the uncharted reaches of space. Every moment, they felt the heavy pulse of danger behind them. The Zintari would never forgive her. They would hunt them down until the end of time. But Liara had made her choice. She had chosen love over duty, peace over war, and in doing so, had embraced a future that was hers to define, not one dictated by her past. But even as fugitives, their actions rippled across the galaxy in ways they could never have anticipated. Word of their defection spread, and soon voices began to rise in both human and Zintari populations. People from both races, long bound by fear and mistrust, began to question the status quo. Liara and Jacob, once seen as enemies, had become something else entirely, a symbol of hope. Their love, which had once seemed like a fragile, impossible dream, had shown the galaxy that unity was possible, even between the most unlikely of people. It had shown that love could overcome hatred, and compassion could bridge the gap between species. The balance of power in the galaxy had begun to shift. Both sides, the humans and the Zintari, were faced with the realization that their hatred for each other might no longer be the answer. If Liara, a princess of the Zintari, and Jacob, a human soldier, could find common ground and fight together for something greater, then perhaps others could too. Yet the path ahead was still uncertain. Liara and Jacob's love had sparked a revolution, but not one that would be easily won. There were those who sought peace, yes, but there were also those who clung to the old ways of war and division. As fugitives, they couldn't fight in the open, but they could continue to inspire, to rally others to their cause. They could spread the message that peace was not only possible, but necessary. The road to that peace, however, would be long and fraught with challenges. There would be battles ahead, both on the battlefield and in the hearts of those who still saw the other side as an enemy. But for Liara and Jacob, the most important battle had already been fought. They had chosen each other, against all odds, and in doing so, had forged a bond stronger than any weapon, stronger than any military force. The galaxy would never be the same because of their actions. They had given up everything, titles, status, their place in their own worlds, for a future that, while uncertain, held the promise of something better. They had shown that love, no matter how impossible it seemed, could change the course of history. As they flew together into the vast unknown, leaving behind the worlds they had known, Liara and Jacob embraced the uncertainty ahead with courage. The galaxy had been torn apart by war and conflict for far too long. But now, with every step they took, they were building something new. It wouldn't be easy. It might take years or even decades to heal the rift between their people. But as long as they had each other, they would keep fighting. They would keep pushing for a future where understanding and compassion, rather than war and destruction, would be the guiding forces. And in the quiet of space, in the solitude they now shared, they knew one undeniable truth. This was only the beginning of a new era, one where love was the most powerful weapon of all.